March 8th, 1901, Volume 4. It was the cross that made Jesus recognized as God. The cross of pain and the cross of love. Continuing in my poor state, and with the silence of blessed Jesus, this morning, as I was oppressed more than ever, on coming, he told me, "My daughter, it was not my works, nor my preaching, nor the very power of my miracles that made me recognized with clarity as the God I am. But when I was put on the cross, and lifted up on it, as though on my own throne, then was I recognized as God." So the cross alone revealed me to the world, and to the whole of hell for who I really was. All were shaken and recognized their Creator. Therefore, it is the cross that reveals God to the soul, and makes known whether the soul is truly of God. It can be said that the cross uncovers all the intimate parts of the soul, and reveals to God and to men who she is. Then he added, "Upon two crosses do I consume souls. One is of pain, the other is of love. And just as in heaven all 9 choirs of angels love me, though each one has its distinct office, as, for example, the special office of the seraphim is love, and their choir is positioned more in the front in order to receive the reverberations of my love, so much so that my love and theirs, darting through each other, correspond continuously. In the same way, I give to souls on earth their distinct offices. Some I render martyrs of pain, and some of love, as both of them are skillful masters in sacrificing souls and in rendering them worthy of my satisfactions. March 8th, 1910, Volume 9. The upright intention is light of the soul. This morning, blessed Jesus came briefly and told me, "My daughter, the upright intention is light of the soul. It converts her into light, and it gives her the way to operate in a divine manner. The soul is nothing but a dark room, and the upright intention is like sun that enters into it and illuminates it. With this difference, the sun does not turn walls into light, while the upright working transforms everything into light." March 8th, 1912, Volume 11. How Jesus was a victim during his hidden life. Becoming a victim is equivalent to a second baptism, and with effects superior to those of baptism itself. What eliminates the state of victim? This morning, Father G. offered himself as a victim to our Lord, and I was praying, offering him, that he would accept him. Then my always adorable Jesus told me, "My daughter, I accept him wholeheartedly. Tell him that his life will no longer belong to him, but to me, and that I chose him as a victim of my hidden life." My hidden life was victim for the whole interior life of man, so it repaired for the bad thoughts, desires, tendencies, and affections. All that the exterior of man does is nothing other than the expression of his interior. If so much evil shows on the outside, what will the interior be like? Therefore, the remaking of the interior of man cost me very much. It is sufficient to say that it took me as long as 30 years. My thought, my heartbeat, breath, and desire were always intent on running close to the thought, heartbeat, breath, and desire of man, in order to repair for them, satisfy for them, and sanctify them. So I choose him as victim for this purpose of my hidden life, and I want all his interior with me, united and offered to me, to satisfy me for the evil interior of other creatures. I choose him for this on purpose, since being a priest, he knows better than others the interior of the souls, the rottenness and the slime which is in them. From this he can better know how much my state of victim cost me, a state in which I want him to take part, and not only him, but also others whom he will approach. My daughter, tell him of the great grace I give to him by accepting him as a victim, since becoming a victim is equivalent to receiving a second baptism, and with effects even greater than baptism. In fact, it is about rising again in my own life, and since the victim has to live in me and of me, I need to wash him from every stain, giving him a new baptism and strengthening him in grace, to be able to admit him to live with me. Therefore, from now on, I will consider anything he does as mine rather than his own. So whether he prays, speaks, or works, he will say that these things are my things. After this, Jesus seemed to be looking around, and I, "What are you looking at, O Jesus? Aren't we alone?" And he said, "No, there are people. I attract them around you to keep them tightly to me." And I, "Do you love them?" And he, "Yes, but I would like them to be more nimble, more trusting, more brave, and more intimate with me, with no thought for themselves. They must know that victims are no longer the owners of themselves, otherwise they would cancel the state of victim." Then, having to cough a little, I said, "Jesus, make me die of consumption. Hurry, hurry, let me come. Take me with you." And Jesus, "Don't make me see you feel discontent, otherwise I suffer. Yes, you will die of consumption, just a little longer. And if you won't die of physical consumption, you will die consumed of love. Please, do not get out of my will, for my will be your paradise, or better still, the paradise of my will. For as many days as you will be on earth, so many paradises will I give you in heaven." March 8th, 1914, Volume 11. The divine will centralizes all its goods and its divine work in those who live in it. The value of one single instant in the divine will. All that the soul who lives in the divine will experiences does not belong to her, but to Jesus within her. One who lives in the divine will cannot go to purgatory. Continuing in my usual state, my always adorable Jesus did not cease to speak to me very often about his most holy will. I will say that little which I remember. So as I was not feeling well, blessed Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, the soul who lives in my will can say regarding everything I do, all this is mine. This because the will of the soul who gave herself to me is so much identified with my will that everything my will does, she does as well. As she lives and dies in my volition, there is no good which she does not bring with herself, since there is no good which is not contained in my will. My will is the life of all the good that can be done by creatures. Therefore, dying to this life, the soul in my will carries with her the masses which are celebrated, the prayers, and the good works which are done, since all of them are fruits of my will. This is still very little compared to the work of my will itself, which the soul carries with her as her own. One instant of the work of my will is enough to surpass all the work of all creatures, past, present, and future. As the soul dies in my will, there is no beauty that matches her, nor height, wealth, sanctity, wisdom, or love. Nothing. Nothing can be compared to her. Nothing equals her. As the soul who dies, identified with my will, enters into the heavenly fatherland, not only will the heavens' gates open, but the entire heaven will bow to welcome her into the celestial residence, to honor the work of my will which is in her. What can I tell you, then, of the feast and the surprise of all the blessed in seeing this soul completely marked by the work of the divine will? Or in seeing that all which this soul did during her life, having done everything in my volition, each saying, each thought, work, action, and so forth, are many suns which adorn her, each one different from the other for light and beauty. And in seeing in this soul many divine rivulets which will inundate all the blessed and flow also upon earth for the benefit of pilgrim souls, since heaven cannot contain them. Ah, my daughter, my will is the portent of portents. It is the secret to finding light, sanctity, and riches. It is the secret of all goods, not yet intimately known, and therefore not appreciated or loved as it deserves. You appreciate it, love it, and make it known to those whom you see disposed. Another day, being in suffering, I felt like I was unable to do anything, so I felt oppressed. And Jesus, hugging me, told me, "My daughter, do not worry yourself. Try only to be abandoned in my will, and I will do everything for you. One single instant in my will is more than all the good you could ever do in your entire life." I also remember that another day he told me, "My daughter, one who really does my will in everything which occurs within her, both in the soul and in the body, in all that she feels and suffers, can say, 'Jesus suffers, Jesus is oppressed.' In fact, everything that creatures do to me reaches me in the soul who does my will, in whom I dwell. Therefore, if the coldness of the creatures reaches me, my will feels it, and since my will is the life of that soul, consequently, the soul feels it too. So instead of troubling herself over this coldness as if it were her own, she should remain around me to console me and repair for the coldness that the creatures send to me. In the same way, if she feels distractions, oppressions, and other things, she must remain around me to relieve me and repair as if they were not her own things but mine. Therefore the soul who lives from my will feel many different pains, according to the offenses that I receive from creatures, but in a sudden way and almost in one leap. On the other hand, she will also feel indescribable joys and contentments. And if she must take care to console me and repair for the first, she must delight in the joys and contentments. Only then does my will find my interest. Otherwise it would remain saddened and unable to accomplish what my volition contains." Another day he told me, "My daughter, one who does my will can by no means go to purgatory, because my will purges the soul of everything. After keeping her jealously during her life, in the custody of my volition, how could I allow the fire of purgatory to touch her? At the most, she may lack some clothing, but my will, before unveiling the divinity, will clothe her with all that she may lack. Then I reveal myself." With her love, the Virgin called the Word to incarnate himself in her womb. With her love, and by fusing herself in the divine will, Luisa calls the divine will to have life on earth within her. While praying, I was fusing all of myself in the divine will, and my sweet Jesus came out from within my interior and throwing his arms around my neck, told me, "My daughter, with her love, with her prayers, with her annihilation, my mamma called me from heaven to earth to incarnate myself in her womb. You, with your love, and with your continuous dissolving of yourself in my volition, will call my will to have life on earth within you, and then you will give me life in other creatures. However, know that as my mamma called me from heaven to earth inside her womb, since the act she did was a unique act which will never be repeated again, I enriched her with all graces. I endowed her with so much love as to make her surpass the love of all creatures united together. I gave her primacy in the privileges, in the glory, in everything. I could say that the whole of the Eternal One reduced himself to one single point and poured himself upon her in torrents, in immense seas, so much so that all remain below her. As you call my will into yourself, this too is a unique act. Therefore, for the decorum of my will which must dwell in you, I must pour in you so much grace, so much love, as to make you surpass all other creatures. And since my will has supremacy over all, and is eternal, immense, infinite, I must communicate this to the one in whom the life of my will must have its beginning and completion, endowing and enriching her with the same qualities of my will, giving her supremacy over all. My eternal volition will take the past, the present, and the future. It will reduce them to one single point, and will pour them into you. My will is eternal, and wants to have life there where it finds eternity. It is immense, and wants life in the immensity. It is infinite, and wants to find infinity. How can I find all this if I do not pour it in you before? On hearing this, I was frightened and terrified. If I wrote this, it is because obedience imposed itself. And I said, "Jesus, what are you saying? You really want to confuse me and humiliate me to the dust. I feel that I cannot even tolerate what you are saying. I feel a terror that frightens all of me." And he added, "What I say to you will serve to myself. It is necessary for the sanctity and dignity of my will. I do not lower myself to reside where I do not find the things that belong to me. You will be nothing other than the depository of such a great good, which you must keep jealously. Therefore pluck up courage, and do not fear." March 8th, 1925, Volume 17. Luisa desires to cover the paths of the eternal will. How Jesus Christ enclosed his will in order to give, in each one of his acts, a return in the name of all. I was saying to myself, how I wish I could cover all the paths of the eternal will, to be able to find all the acts of this supreme will, which came from it for the good of all the human family, in order to place an act of my will on each act of his will, to return him with my love, with my gratitude, with my thank you, for me and in the name of all my brothers. But how can I find all these acts of the divine will, I who am so little, so insignificant? Now, while I was thinking about this, desiring to embrace, to place one kiss, or at least one "I love you," on every act of the supreme will, I felt my sweet Jesus move in my interior, and a light within my mind saying to me, "My daughter, do you want to go through all the acts of my will? which came from it for the good of all creatures? Come with me into my humanity. I want it. I long for you to do it. You must know that my humanity covered all the paths of the eternal will, and for all the acts I found, which were done for the good of all my brothers, I omitted my own, to return the divine will for its many acts, done for the good of the human generations. This was the most legitimate act, which it was appropriate for me to do, for the prime honor of my celestial Father. And as I was doing this, I left the deposit of my acts in the divine will itself, so that they might remain always in act of giving to my divine Father this legitimate honor which creatures do not give him, and of forcing the eternal will to make peace with the human will. The will, also in the creature, is the deposit of all her thoughts, of the good and of the evil she does. It is the depository of everything, and it lets nothing escape which it does not deposit within itself. Now my humanity had two wills, the human and the divine, and everything I did I placed in the divine, not only to find all the acts done by the supreme will and give return to it, but to do more new acts of divine will, in order to form in it, with all the work of my humanity, a new creation, leaving it in deposit within it, so that it might maintain it whole, ever new and beautiful, without increasing or decreasing, since it is not subject to receive the slightest diminution. Just like in the creation of the heavens, of the sun, of the stars, and of many other things created by the divinity for the good of all the human family, all was left deposited in our supreme will, so that it might preserve them always in that state in which we created them, as in fact it does. In the same way, I entrusted all the work of my humanity to this divine will, so that everything I did might always be in the act of giving itself to the creatures. My work is more than a new heaven, sun, and stars. And just as the sun which is on your horizon does not refuse to give light to all, and to give itself to each one, and if the human eye does not take all the immensity of its light, it is because the circumference of the eye is small, or rather the eye takes more light according to how sharp and good is its sight, even though the sun remains in the act of wanting to give all of itself. In the same way, the new creation of my acts, all done in this divine will, and deposited in it in order to redeem and restore the creature, are in the act of giving themselves to all. And more than sun, stars, and heaven, they extend upon the head of all, so that all may take the great good which they contain. However, there is a great difference between the sun which shines in the blue heaven and the one contained in the blue heaven of my humanity. In the first one, as much as the eye strives to look in order to be filled with light, its circumference does not expand. It remains always as it is, while the eye of the soul, the more it strives to look, to cooperate, to know, to love all that my humanity has done, becomes larger, receives more light, comprehends more, and takes more good. Therefore it is in its power to become richer or poorer, more filled with light and heat, or colder and filled with darkness. Now, if you want to cover the paths of the eternal will, enter through the door of my humanity. In it you will find my divinity, and the divine will make present to you, as though in act, all that it did, does, and will do, both in creation and in redemption and sanctification. And you will have the contentment of being able to kiss those acts, and to place in each one of them your little act of love, of adoration, of gratitude. There you will find my acts, all of them in the act of giving themselves to you, and you will love them, and will take the gifts of your celestial Father. Greater than these he could not give you, the gifts, the fruits, the effects of his will. But you will take them according to how much you cooperate, letting your will live as dissolved within mine. So for a little while I felt all of myself in Jesus, and I seemed to find in him, as though in act, all the work of the divine will for the good of creatures. I tried to follow, one by one, the acts of the supreme will, but while I was doing this, everything disappeared. The delirium of wanting to find again my sweet Jesus made me fidget. Then, after much hardship, I felt him behind my shoulders, extending his arms towards me and taking my hands in his. With violence I pulled him in front of me, and with all the bitterness of my soul I said to him, "Jesus, you do not love me any more." And he, immediately giving me no time to say anything else, told me, "My daughter, how is it? To me you say, you do not love me any more? These words can be said to creatures, but not to your Jesus, to the one who can never fail in love." And while he was saying this, he stared at me, deep inside, as though wanting to find something in me which interested him very much. And he looked and looked over and over again. Finally, I felt another Jesus come out from within my interior, all similar to the one outside. I remained surprised in seeing that my Jesus was inside of me and outside of me. And he, all goodness, told me, "Tell me, my daughter, who formed this new life in you? Is it not love? Are they not my loving chains, which not only formed me within you, but keep me bound and clinging to you? And so that this life of mine might always grow within you, I placed in you my eternal will. And as it becomes one with yours, we nourish ourselves together with the same celestial food, in such a way as to make my life one with yours. And with all this you say, you do not love me any more?" I remained confused, and I didn't know what to say. March 8, 1928, Volume 23. How God created man to keep him on his knees and to make him act as the repeater of his acts. How Jesus showed himself placing all the volumes written on his will, all ordered, in his heart. Love of Jesus for the writings, and the good that they will do. How one who decides to live in the Fiat is bound with chains of light. I continued to remain all abandoned in the holy divine volition, following its innumerable acts as much as I could, since their multiplicity is such that many times I can neither follow them nor count them all, and I have to content myself with watching them, but not embracing them. Its activity surpasses the human attitude in an incredible way, and therefore it is not given to my littleness to do everything, but to do as much as I can, and never to go out from within the works of the divine Fiat. So while my mind wandered within the works of the divine volition, my sweet Jesus, moving in my interior, told me, "My daughter, our paternal goodness created man to keep him on our paternal knees, for us to enjoy him continuously and for him to enjoy himself perennially with his Creator. and so that his enjoyments and ours might be stable, we kept him on our paternal knees. And since our will was to be his also, it brought the echo of all our acts into man's inmost being, whom we loved as our child. And our child, in hearing our echo, acted as the repeater of the acts of his Creator. What contentments did not form between him and us, as this creating echo of ours resounded in our child's inmost heart, forming in him the order of our acts, the harmony of our joys and happinesses, the image of our sanctity. What happy times for him and for us! But do you know who snatched this child so loved by us from our paternal knees? The human will. It took him so far away from us that he lost our creating echo, and no longer knew anything of what his Creator was doing. And we lost the happiness of seeing our child happy and amusing himself on our paternal knees, because the echo of his will took over in him that embittered him, tyrannized him with passions, the most degrading ones, such as to render him so unhappy as to arouse pity. This is precisely what it means to live in our will, to live on our paternal knees, under our care, at our expenses, in the opulence of our riches, joys, and happinesses. If you knew the contentment we feel in seeing the creature living on our knees, all attentive on hearing the echo of our word, the echo of our works, the echo of our steps, the echo of our love, to act as the repeater of them, you would be more attentive, so that nothing might escape you of our echo, to give us the contentment of seeing your littleness acting as the repeater of the acts of your Creator. On hearing this, I said to him, "My love, if one must live in your will by living on your paternal knees, one should not do anything, neither operate nor walk. Otherwise, how can one remain on your knees?" And Jesus, "No, no, one can do anything. Our immensity is such that she will find our paternal knees everywhere, ever ready for her acts, willing to hold her everywhere, clasped to our divine knees. More so, since what she does is nothing other than the echo of what we do." After this, I was feeling worried about these writings on the divine will, and my sweet Jesus made himself seen in my interior, holding all the volumes written on it, taking them in his hands, one by one, looking at them with such loving tenderness, as if his heart were about to burst. And as he took them, he placed them all ordered in his most holy heart. I was amazed in seeing with how much love he loved these writings, and with how much jealousy he enclosed them in his heart in order to keep them. And Jesus, in seeing my amazement, told me, "My daughter, if you knew how much I love these writings, they cost me more than the very creation and redemption. How much love and work I have put into these writings. They cost me very, very much. In them there is all the value of my will. They are the manifestation of my kingdom, and the confirmation that I want the kingdom of my divine will in the midst of creatures. The good that they do will be great. They will be like suns that will rise in the midst of the thick darkness of the human will, like lives that will put to flight death for the poor creatures. They will be the triumph of all my works, the most tender, the most convincing narration of how I loved and do love man. And therefore I love them with such jealousy that I will keep them in my divine heart, nor will I permit even a single word to be lost. What have I not put into these writings? Everything. Superabundant grace, light that illuminates, warms, fecundates, love that wounds, truths that conquer, attractions that enrapture, lives that will bring about the resurrection of the kingdom of my will. Therefore you too appreciate them, and hold them in that esteem that they deserve, and delight in the good that they will do. After this, I continued in my abandonment in the Fiat. I felt all invested by its endless light, and my adorable Jesus added, "My daughter, as the soul decides to live in my divine will, without giving life to her own any more, in order to be sure and to give her security, I bind her with chains of light. And I do this so as not to take away her free will, a gift given to the creature in creation. What I give once, I never take back, unless the creature herself rejects my gifts. And so I bind her with light in a way that, if she wants to, she can go out whenever she wants. But in order to go out, she has to make an incredible effort, because these chains of light will invest all of her acts, and in each act of hers she will feel and see the beauty, the grace, the richness that this light communicates to her acts. It will form the enchantment and the true eclipse for the human will, in such a way that she will feel happy and honored to be bound with chains so noble, that bring her so much good, and she will yearn for what is human to have life no more in her acts, and will long with ardor for the divine volition to take its place. So she will feel free and bound, but not forced, rather spontaneous of her own will, attracted by the great good that comes to her, in such a way as to see her acts surrounded by many circles of light that, forming chains, transform her into the light itself. And in each of her acts, the soul will emit many voices, harmonious and beautiful, like silvery sounds that, wounding the hearing of all heaven, will make known that my divine will is operating in the creature. March 8th, 1929, Volume 25. How Creation is the Celestial Band. How the Fiat possesses the generative virtue. I continue to go around in the acts of the divine Fiat, and gathering all together the whole creation, asking in each thing that the divine will come to reign upon earth, I was bringing them all together to my Creator, to give him the glory of all creation, and say to him, "Adorable Majesty, listen, I pray you, in the heavens, in the stars, in the sun, in the wind, in the sea, and in all creation, asking you that your Fiat come to reign upon earth. Let the will of all be one." But while I was doing this, my adorable Jesus, coming out from within my interior, told me, "My daughter, all creation forms the celestial band, because each created thing contains light, the power of my word Fiat, that produces the most beautiful music. And just as each created thing is not like any of the others, in the same way, my divine volition, in creating them with its creating word, just as it made them one distinct from the other, so it placed in them a distinct sound, like many notes, such as to form the most beautiful concert, that no terrestrial music can imitate. The multiplicity of the sounds with the corresponding notes is so great, for as many as are the created things. So the heavens contain one sound. Each star has its distinct sound. The sun has another, and so with all the rest. These sounds are nothing other than the participation in the harmony that my divine will possesses. In fact, as it pronounces its Fiat, by possessing the generative, communicative, and fecundating virtue, wherever it is pronounced, it leaves its beautiful qualities of light, of beauty, and of unreachable harmony. Is it perhaps not its communicative virtue that communicated so much beauty, order, and harmony to the whole universe? And is it not by its breath alone that it nourishes the whole creation, maintaining it fresh and beautiful just as it created it? Oh, if creatures would let themselves be nourished by the breath of my omnipotent Fiat, all evils would no longer have life in them. Its generative and nourishing virtue would communicate to them light, beauty, order, and the most beautiful harmony. What can my Fiat not do and give? Everything. Now, my daughter, as you were gathering all created things in order to bring them to us as the most beautiful homage, to ask us for our kingdom upon earth, since each thing has the notes and the sound within itself, has its own property, immediately they began their music, so beautiful and harmonious, that our divinity pricked up its ear and said, "The little daughter of our Fiat is bringing us our celestial band, and in their sound they say to us, 'May the kingdom of our divine will come upon earth.'" Oh, how pleasing it sounds to us, how it descends deep into our inmost divine bosom, and it all moves us to compassion for so many creatures without the life of our Fiat. Ah, only one who lives in it can move heaven and earth, and rise onto our paternal knees to snatch from us a good so great, which is the Fiat voluntas tua on earth as it is in heaven. After this I kept following the divine will in so many multiple effects that it produces in the whole creation, and my always lovable Jesus added, "My daughter, with one single act my Fiat produces many effects, sustaining the whole creation. Its act is the life that it gives in order to form each created thing. The effects are the nourishments that it administers, like many different foods to each thing, to maintain them beautiful and fresh, just as it created them. So my divine will is the sustainer, the nourisher, and the vivifier of all creation. Now one who lives in my divine volition, together with it, sustains, nourishes, and vivifies all created things. She is the inseparable one of my Fiat. As the creature operates in it, she acquires the breath, and breathing together with my Fiat, she maintains what was done once, always alive. Even more, she has the virtue of vivifying and calling to life the many acts of my will to which the human will has given death. In fact, my will has a continuous act to give to creatures, and when they have not done my will, these acts have died for them. And one who lives in it has the virtue of vivifying them and of keeping them alive. End of March 8th. Fiat.